The government just told us inflation is 2.3%. And if you're sitting there thinking, that does not match my life, you're not wrong and you're not crazy. Today, we're going to break down exactly why that number exists and what's actually in it and what it means for you if you own, rent, or you're thinking about buying in Calgary. First, what even is the CPI? The Consumer Price Index is basically Stats Canada's monthly report card on prices. They take a giant imaginary shopping basket filled with hundreds of things Canadians buy, and they track how much that basket costs over time. When the basket gets more expensive, inflation goes up. When it gets cheaper, it goes down. Simple enough, but here's where it gets interesting and a little bit frustrating. Your shopping basket is probably not the same as their basket. The CPI basket is an average across all Canadians. It includes gasoline, cell phones, electronics, durable goods, things you might buy once a year or once a decade. But it also includes groceries, rent, and utilities, which you pay every single month. The stuff you buy often hits you harder. The stuff you buy rarely, barely registers. That's the gap between the number and the feeling. So what got us to 2.3%? Two big things. Gasoline fell hard and shelter inflation finally cooled. Let's start with gas. Since we're in Calgary, I want to spend some real time here because there's more to this story than most people are telling you. Gas prices dropped 16.7% year over year in January. That is the single biggest reason headline inflation looks as good as it does. But strip out gas entirely. CPI is 3%. That's a very different headline. Now, here's what I really want to talk about because this is where the data gets interesting. For years, we were told the carbon tax was revenue neutral, that the rebates made it a wash, that it wasn't inflationary. That was not an accurate picture. Here's what we actually know now. The federal carbon tax added 17.61 cents per liter to gasoline right up until it was removed April 1st, 2025. And because GST gets applied on top of your total transaction, including that tax, the real consumer visible cost was closer to 18 to 20 cents per liter, depending on your province. The Bank of Canada, not a conservative thinking tank, the Bank of Canada confirmed that removing the carbon tax lowered the CPI by about 0.7% and reduced year-over-year inflation by about 0.7 percentage points for a full year. That's their number, not mine. So let me ask this plainly. If removing it lowers inflation by 0.7%, how was having it not inflationary? Now, the government's actual claim was that it was revenue neutral, meaning the money collected came back to households as rebates. But revenue neutral and inflation neutral are two completely different things. If you drove more than average, tradespeople, rural Albertans, realtors, anyone with a commute, you paid more than you got back. The rebate was an average. Your pump bill was not. As for whether it helped the environment, that's a whole other debate, and I'll leave that one alone. What we know for certain is that it costs you real money at the pump every single time you filled up. And the Bank of Canada's own numbers now tell us exactly how much. Of the 16.7% year-over-year drop in gas prices in January, research breaks it down like this. Roughly 60 to 75% of that drop is directly attributable to the carbon tax removal. The remaining 25 to 40% is market forces, mainly crude oil, which dropped about 21% from January 2025 to January 2026, plus some base effects from provincial tax changes. Alberta already had its own provincial fuel tax relief program that adjusts based on WTI prices. So we had some protection on that side, but the federal carbon tax sat on top of all of it for years. And we were told it wasn't a burden, but the numbers say otherwise. So if you're in Calgary and have noticed your gas bill is lighter lately, part of that is the carbon tax being gone. Part of it is crude oil sitting in the low 60s. Both are real, but the policy had a cost, and now that it's removed, we can measure exactly what that cost was. One last note on gas is still one of the most volatile components in the entire CPI basket. It goes down, it comes back up. So while the drop is welcome, I wouldn't hang a rate cut forecast on it alone. There are two more things in this report that artificially move the numbers, and you deserve to know about them. One, the GST holiday hangover. Last year, the government ran a temporary tax exemption on certain items, restaurants, alcohol, kids, clothing, toys, from mid-December 2024 to mid-February 2025. Prices were artificially low during that window. Now that the holiday is gone, we're comparing today's prices to that artificially low base. So restaurant meals look like they jumped 12.3% year over year. Did restaurants actually raise prices 12%? No. The tax came back. The comparison is just kind of broken. Stats Canada changed how they measure cellular pricing. That change pulled the cellular services category down dramatically from 14.6% in December to 4.9% in January. One methodology tweak, 1 month, and it moves national inflation. That's not fraud, it's just how statistics work, but it's worth knowing. When people say CPI is fake, this is what they mean. It's not fake, but it is constructed, and the construction matters. Now, shelter inflation falling below 2% for the first time in nearly 5 years, that is genuinely meaningful. Rent growth is slowing. Mortgage interest costs are stabilizing. This is real progress, and I'm not going to pretend it's not a positive, because it is. The biggest inflation problem Canada had over the last few years was housing costs. The pressure is now easing a little bit. It just doesn't fix what you're feeling at the grocery stores. Here's the number that's actually running your life right now. Food purchased from stores is up 4.8% year over year, and that's after fresh fruit prices pulled it down slightly this month. Meat is up 9.4%. Restaurant meals are up 12.3%. Like we chatted about. And yes, part of that is the tax holiday base effect, but not all of it. This week, the food professor posted something on X that I am going to share with you guys here right now, and just let that sink in for a second. About sums up the narrative Canadians were fed this week about why food prices are rising. Blame everything except Ottawa. Okay, here's something I want to ask. You go to the grocery store, you throw things in the cart, and somehow you always walk out spending more than you planned, of course. Meanwhile, you can get a full meal delivered for not that much more than you'd be spending to buy the ingredients. I know that sounds backwards, but with groceries where they are right now, the mental math on cooking at home has genuinely shifted for a lot of people. I don't think I'm alone in that. I mean, tell me if I am crazy or maybe I'm just overbuying at the grocery store, but I really walk away feeling that way. Like sometimes it's just cheaper to order in. Let's talk about the policy piece, because this is why any of this matters for real estate. The Bank of Canada has an inflation target of 2%. We're at 2.3% headline, but core inflation, their preferred measure, is still running closer to 2.4 to 2.7. That's not emergency territory, but it's not mission accomplished either. What the CPI print does is give the Bank of Canada options. It doesn't force cuts, but it removes one of the main arguments against cutting if the economy starts to weaken. And there are signs that it is weakening. Job data has been soft, consumer spending is under pressure, and the tariff environment is a real wildcard, especially for Alberta's energy sector. Here's the important nuance, though. The Bank of Canada knows that a big chunk of the gasoline drop is carbon tax related, a one-time policy change, not a structural shift. They've said it themselves. So they're not going to cut rates just because headline CPI looks good for a few months. They're watching the underlying numbers. The scenario we're watching for, if growth continues to slow and core inflation stays contained, rate cuts become more likely in the back half of 2026. If that happens, borrowing costs ease, qualifications improve slightly, and Calgary's market, which is already sitting on elevated inventory, could see some renewed demand. Now, we're not there yet, but this CPI print is a step in the right direction. If you have any questions, you can book a call with me in the link below. If you got any value from this video, please like and subscribe if you want to see more from me. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.